Good morning. If everyone will take their seat, we'll get started. Man, this is one tired group of mayors. How many were out late last night? Raise your hand. All right. And there'll probably be a few stragglers that come in throughout the morning plenary session. Well, I think we've had a great first day and a half. How about a round of applause for the city of Miami? It's gone fabulously. Welcome to the official opening session of the 85th annual meeting of the United States Conference of Mayors. Let me introduce my officers. Vice President Mitch Landrieu of New Orleans. And our second Vice President is Steve Benjamin of Columbia, South Carolina. Round of applause for Steve. And we have one past president, Elizabeth Couts of Burnsville, Minnesota. Elizabeth. And our executive director, who probably didn't go to bed at all, Tom Cochran. Would everyone please stand for the presentation of colors by the Multi-Agency Police and Fire Honor Guard and remain standing. And now the national anthem will be sung by Melina Almodovar.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight for the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flame was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave for the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, and you can be seated. Melina, that was a beautiful rendition of our national anthem. Thank you. And now the invocation will be given by Reverend Gary Johnson of the Miami Beach Police Department.
Good morning. I can tell it's a good morning because I see a lot of coffee cups. For those of you just getting in from Club Levine, I call it Club Levine because Club Live, I'm sure you all had a wonderful time, but I wanted to, before I give you the invocation, I wanted to first thank our mayor, the Honorable Mayor Philip Levine. And I say that because this mayor has a spirit of godness in him. When I tell you that this man is an extraordinary man, I couldn't let you leave without saying this about him because he's a man that builds unity among the community. I actually love this man. We need more mayors like him. I looked up the definition of mayor, and it said one that governs a city or a town. There's another definition that says he is equal to the president. So today, mayors, I pray for you because you are the foundation of this great United States of America. Without you, the fabric would tear apart. So having said that, if you don't mind, just where you are, bow your heads for a moment of prayer. So God, we thank you for this beautiful morning that you created. We thank you for all the mayors. These are your servants. Though crime is rampant all over the United States, we pray that you use their mind now to think your thoughts. Use their mouth to speak your power to existence. Use their hearts to continue to show America that we're founded on love. So thank you for the work. Thank you for the work of the mayors. Thank you for the mayors that's sitting in this room today. Thank you for the heart that they are willing to serve and serve religiously. So we thank you for this beautiful day that you created. We may not see this day again. And as we go through this beautiful day, God, we pray for the leadership. Our senator that had been shot, we pray for a speedy recovery. We pray for all leadership. We pray for even our president of the United States of America. You said, if my people, which are called by my name, would humble themselves, pray, seek my face, turn from their wicked ways, then you will heal the land. I close this prayer with a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King. He says, though we know all have been in a crystal stair, we must keep going. We must keep moving. To our mayors, just in case you can't fly, run. And if you can't run, walk. And if you can't walk, crawl. But by any means, keep moving. I pray this prayer in your wonderful name. And those who love the Lord, let us all say amen.
Thank you, Reverend Johnson. I am now pleased to introduce our host for this meeting, Mayor Philip Levine. During his tenure, Mayor Levine has made Miami Beach a more climate-resilient community. He has pioneered nationally recognized efforts to protect Miami Beach from the rising sea levels. The mayor and his team have worked tirelessly, as many of you know, in preparing for this annual conference so we could all experience the very best this beautiful city has to offer. We're so fortunate to be in Miami Beach for the next several days, and I personally want to thank Mayor Levine for his work on all of our behalf. So please join me thanking and welcoming and bringing to the stage our amazing host, the Mayor of Miami Beach, Mayor Philip Levine.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the second time in history that the United States Conference of Mayors has been held in Miami Beach, Florida. On that occasion, 55 years ago, President John F. Kennedy delivered remarks from the White House to a group of mayors sitting in this same room in this same hotel. Only a few months earlier, I was born and would grow up just a few blocks down the street from President Kennedy's childhood home in Brookline, Massachusetts. I remember every day when I went to elementary school, I could see his report card hanging on the wall in the hallway. I realized then that you didn't need straight A's to become the mayor of a major city or the president of the United States of America. Of course, times back then were different. But I believe the president's message and vision about the power of mayors and local government to get things done still holds true today. Let me take you back 55 years when President Kennedy dialed in from the White House to share a few words with a similar group of equally dedicated mayors.
I'm very sorry I cannot be with you personally today because I've enjoyed that experience in the past. This conference is a matter of great interest to me and to the national government because we have been devoting a good deal of our time and effort to attempt to assist you in meeting the problems of our growing urban areas, an area and an environment where over 70% of our people live. Because of this great national challenge, we developed a program to broaden the housing opportunities for people of low and moderate incomes in our great cities and towns across the country. We now have before the Congress a major proposal on urban mass transportation. I'm confident that the Congress will act on it favorably this year. We have greatly expanded the water pollution control program, and we have recommended to the Congress a comprehensive program in the field of air pollution control. We have joined in attempting to assist you in the acquisition of much-needed open space land in urban areas. And I believe that last year's enactment of airport aid legislation will assure continuing progress towards meeting the objectives of the National Airport Plan. Through the retraining and area redevelopment programs, we are engaged in a pioneering effort to reduce chronic unemployment in many of our communities. I'm sure as city officials you've been heartened by the United States Supreme Court decision requiring more equitable representation of our urban areas in state legislatures, because from that I believe progress can come. Our urban areas, and I think the country, suffered a setback in our recent failure in establishing a Department of Urban Affairs and Housing. But I believe that this country will come more and more to realize, and the Congress will, the necessity for us organizing those departments of the federal government who are concerned with urban affairs in such a way as to provide maximum service to your people. This is a matter of great challenge to us in the years ahead. In a short few decades, we've moved from a rural to an urban way of life. And before long, we should be a nation with a vastly extended population, living in great urban areas in housing that does not now exist, served by community facilities that do not now exist, and moved about by means of transportation systems that do not now exist. These are the facts of life which affect our people that make it very necessary to strengthen and improve the machinery through which the federal government acts to help you meet your urban problems. This development and these problems are tied up to all of our other great national challenges. Conversely, the welfare of our urban areas is essential to the prosperity of our farm families. Thus, it seems to me we should approach the matters which concern you from a national rather than merely from a sectional or regional viewpoint. We believe that you, representing on the most intimate level millions of Americans, will continue your efforts to make our nation's cities a better place for all of us to live. And you can be sure, you can be very sure and confident that the federal government will also continue to work with you in achieving this great and worthwhile objective. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and I wish you great success in your conference.
55 years later, President Kennedy's words to us, his advice for us, still speaks to all of us. He urged us not to dwell in the past, but to challenge the future with everything we've got. He warned us not to lead with partisan brinkmanship, but to excel beyond it by rallying our brightest minds, our boldest ideas, and by appealing to the best in all of us. While the spirit of John F. Kennedy can still be felt in this room and in living rooms across America, more than half a century later, we are confronted with a monumental test. As the news today is consumed with rancor, as hearing rooms in Washington are mired in instigations and investigations, all while the public struggles to find something to cheer about, pull together about, and believe in. And so they look to us, America's mayors, to change the narrative by delivering change. Mayors understand that partisanship doesn't create jobs, that ideology alone doesn't foster schools that excel and children who succeed, that bluster and bickering never built a mass transit system or preserved a park or ensured clean drinking water or gave residents confidence that maybe tomorrow, just maybe, will be a little better than yesterday. As mayors, we surely can attest to the wisdom of another president, Thomas Jefferson, who more than 200 years ago advised the young nation that government is at its best when it's closest to the people. Because unlike legislators who cast votes over matters they never personally experience, you and I are responsible for improving the lives of others every minute of every day. In cities across America where innovation is born and hope lives. So when Washington is paralyzed by pettiness or state capitals are consumed with self-preservation and control, do not lose your spirit. Do not lose your mission. Do not give up. Never, ever give up. Like Fiorello LaGuardia, all 5 feet 2 inches of them, who built parks, airports, and housing while rebuilding trust in the police and in City Hall, or Tom Bradley, who broke barriers by braving up to stand up for those long ignored, a liberal who believed business was good for the business of the city. Their spirit also lives in us and through us today, as today's mayors and cities halls across the nation understand that getting things done is not about left or right. It's about moving forward. Like Nashville's Megan Barry, the first woman elected to lead her city, whose local hire initiative is putting her community to work on infrastructure. Or LA Mayor Eric Garcetti leading a high-tech revolution in what is becoming a very high-tech city. Or New Orleans' Mitch Landrieu, fostering community trust to bridge the gap that once existed among residents in a wonderfully diverse city. Or Mick Cornett, who turned Oklahoma City from a pasture of possibilities to a thunder of urban triumphs. Or Flint's Karen Weaver, who refused to allow politics to pollute the need to stop pollution in the drinking water. Or Steve Benjamin, the first African-American mayor of Columbia, South Carolina, who's leading the way towards a goal of 100% renewable energy in cities nationwide. Or Boston's Marty Walsh, a hometown kid from my hometown, whose leadership on homelessness, substance abuse, is making Beantown a town that all America's talking about. Or San Bernardino's Carrie Davis, and Orlando's Buddy Dyer, whose leadership during the most difficult of moments healed communities torn apart by pain. Well, the mayors of Oakland, Madison, Detroit, Atlanta, Austin, and Jersey City, all cities recently named among America's most booming cities for jobs, culture, and affordable real estate. Closer to home, Florida's mayors are leading the charge to make Florida the future state. From Ashton Hayward in Pensacola, fighting to preserve his city's coastline, and Tampa's Bob Buckhorn leading his city through a historic transformation, to some of our local mayors, including Miami Gardens' Oliver Gilbert, Pembroke Pines' Frank Ortis, Wayne Messam of Miramar, and Dr. Joseph Smith of the city of North Miami, who are all working around the clock to ensure their cities are on the forefront of economic progress. The mayors of today have the vision to innovate, the courage to stand up, and a willingness to reach across all lines to establish new starting lines. It is because of our nation's mayors that there is water conservation in Las Vegas, a living wage in Seattle, transformative light rail in Denver, smart technology in Charlotte. Because central control from centralized government is simply no match for local control and local government when it comes to caring for people or getting things done. It's part of our DNA. Like the original colonists who rebelled against a powerful ruler that had become foreign and removed from the interests of those they ruled. Ask any parent today, concerned that local schools need less lecturing and more help from Washington and their state capital, or any business today looking to expand and grow jobs by using local talent and local assets. When it comes to government, they're less interested in how votes are cast than what actions are taken. Ask any American today who is searching for hallmarks of leadership at a time when leaders are becoming harder to find. Leaders to drive 21st century economies where all are lifted, to create and preserve 21st century parks that nourish the young and comfort the old. Leaders who will safeguard the public, where the men and women in blue are given our full respect as they give us ours and theirs. Leaders who will make America's urban neighborhoods seamless. So when there is a railroad track, there is no difference in the equality of opportunities on either side. Leaders who are determined to replace divisiveness and ugliness with inclusiveness and hope. Like you and I'm very proud of the city I lead, where we've used Warren Buffett-like management to create top-line excellence with bottom-line performance. Where we took on sea level rise by deciding that the ocean is either Republican or Democrat, and that doing nothing to stop its rise is simply unacceptable. Where we insisted that a living wage is our God-given responsibility towards those looking for a chance to advance. In fact, that fight even continues here at the Fontainebleau, which continues to take care of its amazing staff, providing thousands of good jobs with decent wages. Miami Beach is a city which, like yours, is rich in history and long on potential. Founded by Carl Fisher, a visionary dreamer who saw a world of possibility on an empty beach. A city which served as America's boot camp for our nation during World War II. As a southern backdrop for the Rat Pack and Jackie Gleason's Fun in the Sun. And for Sonny Crockett and Rico Tubbs in Miami Vice. And more recently, a center stage for Art Basel, the fashion industry, the LGBT community, and for the rebirth of Art Deco in America. We did this as one city. We did this with one purpose. And we did this by pulling together. As President Kennedy said, let us not seek the Republican answer or the Democrat answer, but the right answer. Let us not seek to fix the blame for the past. Let us accept our own responsibility for the future. As mayors, we must continue down that path by embracing the unknown with imagination and resolve, by engaging everyone about what's next and why. And we must lead not from the back of the herd, but from the front. Not with action, but with action, not with words, action. Not distracted by divisiveness, but driven by inclusiveness. The best of America is represented in this room today. The promise of America depends on those in this room today. And I am so proud to be a part of it, to be a part of you. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to the 85th United States Conference of Mayors, held once again in sunny Miami Beach, Florida. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks again. Mayor Levine, thank you. That was extraordinary, seeing and listening to the words of President Kennedy one more time, and many of those words seemed as pertinent today as I'm sure they did over 50 years ago. That videotape work also, Tom, the creativity, that was extraordinary. My son Michael and I have been in the video production business. We need to hire that person, whoever that person was. That was great work. And I think it reminds us just how timeless the work is here. You know, cities have been around a long time. They're likely to be around for a long time to come. This is a good time to thank all of the sponsors of the United States Conference of Mayors in our 85th annual meeting. Let's see if we have an opportunity to thank the sponsors. Let's show a round of applause for all of them, including our title sponsor, Airbnb. I want to thank Airbnb for all of their support in helping to bring in America's mayors. And with us today to tell us more about Airbnb is Christopher Lehane. He is the head of Global Policy and Public Affairs. In this role, he leads Airbnb's work with policymakers around the world to support safe, effective home sharing. In the 1990s, Chris served in various positions in the Clinton administration, including press secretary to Vice President Al Gore, special assistant to President Bill Clinton, and counselor to HUD Secretary Andrew Cuomo. Please welcome Chris Lehane. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's always an honor and pleasure to be here. I did know I was in Miami Beach when I got up this morning to go for my run at about 6:30, and people were still coming back from the night before. Thank you, Mayor Levine, for being the host of this great event. You're someone who's really spent a good chunk of your life fighting on the issue of climate, something that's incredibly important to me, and have enormous respect for what you've done on that front. So thank you for being such a great host. And thank you, Mayor Cornett, for your leadership of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Very successful over the last year. We just did a tax deal in Oklahoma and have a great community in OKC. So look forward to continue to work with the city. Thank you so much. Mr. Cochran, the mayor of the USCM, thank you so much for having us here. It's always a pleasure to be with this group and the great leadership that you've provided. Mayor Kurtz over from Minnesota, where the Super Bowl will be next year, so very excited for that. Yes, absolutely. Mayor Benjamin, your leadership in Columbia, not only on the 1,000-year flood and bringing that community back, but the work you're doing also on climate is incredible, so thank you. And want to also really acknowledge Mayor Landrieu, not just for the work that we did in New Orleans over the last year, which I think really is a model for the country, but for the work that you've done to really bring our country together. You know, we live in a time, as Mayor Levine was touching on, where there's been great conflict. And what you did in and around the monument issue, I think, is a model of leadership. Tell you a brief story, which is I have 2 boys, 10 and 12, and on Memorial Day of this year, I actually had them watch your speech. And I had them watch your speech because I thought what you reflected there was really the big idea of America, an idea that so many families have sacrificed for. So thank you. It was great. What I'd like to talk a bit about today is cities, Airbnb, and specifically the earning gap crisis. The earning gap crisis is really what's at the center of economic inequality, economic opportunity. I'm going to touch on 4 specific issues. The first is the digital age and how it's really transforming society, transforming cities. Secondly, the earning gap in particular and how it relates to that. Third, the Airbnb value proposition. And fourth, how we can partner in and with cities specifically to address the earning gap crisis. So part of the history of humanity is a history of technology disrupting economies, impacting society, ultimately manifesting itself on the ground in cities. If you go back to the very beginning, arguably the most disruptive technology is when humankind harnessed the power of fire. Fire allowed humans to cook meat. Meat allowed the human brain to grow. That separated us from the animal kingdom. It also brought people in from the dark and the cold. People formed tribes. Tribes led the community. Ultimately, much later, that helped form cities. And if you come to the United States after our country was formed, you can see 50-year segments when technology impacted the economy, that in turn impacted society, and then was reflected in cities. 1800 to 1850, new technology around agriculture, particularly the cotton gin, helped fuel Western expansionism. Cities began to grow as trading posts, as ports, as forts. 1850 to 1900, Early industrialization around steam power. Cities really began to grow along waterways. You got more immigration coming from Northern Europe. Then with the advent of electricity, you got the full-blown industrialization. Big cities, urban areas, horizontally, vertically integrated factories, more immigrants coming from around the world. Post-World War II, automobile impacts cities through the rise of suburbs. People begin transporting themselves in different ways. Some of the issues that President Kennedy was talking about relate to that. Today, we are in the digital age. The technology driving that is the microchip. And to put that in perspective, if you look at the 5 largest companies in the world today, they are all network-built, network-based digital platforms, global in their reach. And with this technology has come tremendous benefits that are enriching the world, enriching society, but they also bring significant changes. Just think about how the nature of work is changing so much. More and more people are going to be working for multiple employers over the course of their lifetime. Workers are increasingly mobile in terms of how they work. People are now getting revenue from multiple sources to make sure their economics work on a weekly and monthly basis. And that, in turn, is manifesting itself in changes in the cities, what you all are dealing with on an everyday basis. Cities are becoming hubs for education and innovation. They're becoming larger. More people are actually moving into cities now, as many as are moving into the suburbs, first time since the 1930s. They're becoming homes for these millennials who are seeking out the opportunities, for a creative class that is moving in, that's having implications. And they're also becoming centers of major events, business events and sporting events. I'm actually wearing my Golden State Warriors championship socks as we sit here today. So, but with all of this, cities have had to become laboratories of democracy. All these changes are impacting how cities work. You deal with this every day, particularly with the dysfunction at the federal level. Mayor Levine talked about central government. The responsibility is ultimately falling on cities to address these challenges. And perhaps one of the biggest challenges is what we refer to as the earning gap crisis. Historically, when you've had technological innovation, it has improved productivity. Productivity then leads to an increase in wages. That's not currently happening right now. Technology is kicking in, productivity is going up, but wages have not maintained that type of growth. And we actually did a little bit of an analysis and looked at data from last year. Typical American family is about $4,000 behind from where they would be if historic growth rates had considered. This is really getting at the nub or the hub of that wage gap, of that earnings gap crisis that people are facing. And there's bigger changes coming behind this. You have as much as 50%, close to 50% of all jobs could be displaced or replaced over the next 20 years by robots and AI. For every robot, you lose 6 jobs. This is a challenge that everyone in society is going to face, a particular challenge for those of us in tech. We have a responsibility, given the power of our platforms, to really try to identify and seek solutions on this. One way that you really see this manifesting itself is in the lack of job creation, quality job creation for the vast bulk of the middle class. Those jobs have really stopped being created at the same rate they have been historically. And we can talk about all the graphs and charts that we want, but ultimately behind this are real people, your constituents. These people are dealing with this, and it is impacting their daily lives. And at the heart of the Airbnb value proposition is people. We are a technology platform that's actually connecting people to create economic opportunity for people. We have about 3 million plus hosts. The vast majority are middle-class folks. Most of them are living in urban markets in your cities. Over half, 55%, are women. Very rare to have an economic sector where the majority are women, unless it's a low-end economic sector. Our fastest growing cohort of hosts are senior women who really do depend on the economics. And it's a different model of capitalism. The vast bulk of the wealth being created and generated on the platform stays with our hosts at the grassroots level. And to put that in perspective, the typical host in the United States rents their home 41 times a year. They make 97% of the money that they list their homes for, and they're making typically about $6,100 a year. And I talked earlier about the amount of money people are behind. The Airbnb hosts are using Airbnb to make up that gap, to make up that difference. I want to be clear, Airbnb is not the solution to the economic inequality challenge. I do think we're part of a larger conversation and can be part of a solution to the larger issue. And to be clear, we're doing all of this without a single taxpayer dollar being spent to accomplish that. Now, our hosts really do depend on us. 60% of them depend on the economics, the revenue, to make ends meet, to be able to stay in their home. It's one of the reasons why we have broad public support. We just came out of the field with a poll here in Miami-Dade, have very strong support that's typically reflective of where we are nationally. Now, all this value proposition has really helped generate our growth. We've been around for 8 years. We now have 180 million people who've arrived on the platform. We're in 65,000 plus cities, keeps me very busy, 191 countries. And on New Year's this year, we set a record, at least to the best of our knowledge, for an accommodation company. 2 million people stayed on the platform. And in a time period when people are talking about building walls and closing doors, we think it's pretty good and a positive thing and really appealing to the higher angels of humanity when 2 million people spent a night in a stranger's home, meeting someone different, going to a different community. Now, as we go forward, we're going to want to continue to find ways to use the platform to help address that earning gap, to help address some of the larger economic challenges that cities are dealing with. And we are looking to partner with cities in a variety of ways. Over the last year or so, we've put in place more than 350 partnerships with governments all across the globe. And they really break down into 3 specific categories. The first vertical is we're democratizing tourism through partnerships. Today, global travel and tourism is more than 10% of the global GDP. It's bigger than big oil. 1 in 10 jobs is attached to it. It's growing faster than the overall economy. And the same way people think about healthy food and junk food, we think about healthy travel and mass travel. And what sort of defines healthy travel is travel that is local, travel that is authentic, and most of all, travel that really benefits everyone. On our platform, our travelers typically stay in a non-hotel district. Half the money they spend stays in the neighborhood where they're spending. And to put this in perspective, the chart behind me, those green dots represent hotels in Chicago. They're typically in those usual hotel districts. The red dots represent the Airbnb listings throughout Chicago. And so let's go into the south side of Chicago, a place that has historically been underserved by travel and tourism. Again, green dots represent a limited small number of hotels. Red dots represent the Airbnb listings in that area. We're bringing travel and tourism economics to a community that just typically has not benefited from it. And as a result of our travelers and how our platform works, we've generated 130,000 jobs, supported 130,000 jobs in the US in 2016. By 2020, we'll be generating close to 500,000 jobs on an annual basis. So our economics is really generating that type of economic activity and economic support. And we've put in place some really interesting partnerships. In Rio, we were an official sponsor of the Olympics, helped drive $100 million to local hosts in Rio. In Philadelphia, we worked with former Mayor Nutter to put in place the platform so Philadelphia could keep as much of the money as possible around the papal visit and the Democratic convention so that because they didn't have enough rooms to support people wanting to stay in the city. And in Sweden, just 2 weeks ago, we actually put the entire country on the platform as part of a partnership with the government to promote travel to Sweden. Now, I'm sorry to scare you with that photo, but I was here about a year ago, and I made a pledge, and this really goes to the second thing that we're really trying to do, but my pledge was we were committed to paying our community's fair share of taxes. Since then, we've put in place 250 tax agreements all across the United States. Today, 57% of our hosts are in jurisdictions that are covered by those agreements, and we've collected and remitted $270 million in taxes that are going to cities to support cities. Our money is being used in really interesting ways. In Los Angeles, it's going to help to fund the affordable housing program. In Chicago, it supports homeless children. Here in Miami-Dade, which we just began collecting, it's supporting economic development, particularly tourism promotion. The third way we really work with cities and in cities is to democratize capitalism. Mayor Landrieu, to my left, we worked with, under his leadership, to put in place a regulatory framework in New Orleans that is specifically designed to try to drive travel and tourism to wards that historically have not benefited from it. We're really excited about that, and it is working. In Jersey City, very recently, we put in place a partnership with a landlord to make it possible for those millennials coming out of college with huge debt and unable to make their rent to be able to use home sharing to be able to afford to live in Jersey City. In Japan, a couple of weeks ago, we put in place a national regulatory framework working with the government that is designed to use empty houses in Japan to be part of an economic generation plan that is part of the country's overall economic development plan. Now, most recently, and this is one we're particularly proud of, in Seattle just this week, we announced a partnership where on the platform we are putting in place a way to guarantee that domestic cleaners get paid that livable wage that they deserve to be able to live the types of lives that they need to live. We're really excited about this partnership. We're going to be rolling it out in more cities come Labor Day, and are excited to work with any number of cities here if you're interested in working with us on that. Now, I began this presentation by talking about early humans. I'm going to end it by talking about ancient Greece. In ancient Greece, at the city-states, there was a concept, a principle called philoxenia. What it stood for is the idea that you would invite a stranger into your home. A city-state would invite a stranger into their community. And the theory behind it, represented by people like Pericles and others, was that to create a strong community, a community that had a robust economy, a community that had a flourishing democracy, you needed to be able to embrace people, to bring them in. Well, that reflects our commitment. We want to work with cities to make those cities as strong as possible, to work with the mayors here and your administrations to do our part. And we're really motivated by three specific principles. First of all, we do believe in people, not robots. We do believe in an open society and not a closed society. We do believe in friends and not strangers. We're doing all of this because we're a community-based platform that's made up of the people, by the people, and for the people, to move forward on our ultimate mission, which is to make sure that anyone can belong anywhere. We're privileged to be here. We thank you so much for having us and look forward to continuing to work with the great mayors here and the great cities represented. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And now let me call on our Executive Director, Tom Cochran.
Thank you. I'm here to talk about a guy named Mick Cornett. And I want to let his family stand up. And please let the Cornett family, please stand up if you would. We want to thank you for being here. I see grandkids out there, and I used to see this little guy over here too. So Mayor Daley Sr., the one and only, said, let there be families. Let there be families at the Conference of Mayors meetings. And so welcome to all the children that are here. And you woke up this morning, they told you to come down, and you're saying, oh my goodness, why am I here? Well, you're here because of a very special person, Mick Cornett. Now, he's your grandfather, he's your father. But it's a big deal because last year, all these people in here said that we want him to be the mayor of the year for a whole year. That's a big deal. It's a big deal. It's the greatest honor that a mayor can have. And so we were in Indianapolis. We had the Dalai Lama. We had Lady Gaga. For those people that were not there last year, they were here with us. And the Dalai Lama is still here with us because he talked about love, he talked about compassion, and that is a major, major thing at this inside this organization. But we left Indianapolis, and Mayor Cornett and I went to the Republican convention. He represented us real well there. He represented his city, he represented his state. We went to Quito, Ecuador. He stood on the stage representing Oklahoma and Oklahoma City with other mayors from around the globe. We went to The Hague. That's a city in the Netherlands for you kids out there. That's where all the tulips are and the windmills. The Hague, the capital city of the Netherlands. And we formed the Global Parliament of Mayors. And he was there to help us do that, and that's going to be here forever as we go forward. And one year we went to Milan, Italy, to talk about food and growing food. And he talked about how he put everybody in Oklahoma City on a diet, not to eat food. So it's very interesting the way he talked about that, to eat healthy food and be strong. So then we had this election, And it was a different kind of election, different kind of election. It wasn't the kind that the Dalai Lama talked about. It was tough, it was rough. And we had to go meet our new president. And Mayor Cornett, Mayor Landrieu, Mayor Couch, Mayor Benjamin, we went to see Mr. Trump. And it was a very interesting feeling to, on a cold winter day, to look up at the Trump Tower. I had been to Atlanta to meet Jimmy Carter. He was the president. But going to the Trump Tower and looking up at the Trump Tower was an interesting feeling, knowing that our president was up in that big building. And we walked in, he's sitting at his desk. He said, "What's up?" And we talked to him about infrastructure. We talked to him about the bonds, things like that, the economic issues. And then later, Mayor Cornett talked to the vice president, and we had the vice president to the winter meeting. And so we've done our best through this transition. And we could not have done it without Mayor Cornett. He has led our organization and our cities for his state and for his city through a very, very interesting transition here with this new government. And he was sworn in, the president was sworn in, and we have gone forward. So you need to know that he is the only four-term mayor of Oklahoma City you're going to ever meet, and that's Mick Cornett. So I went out to Oklahoma City about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I sat down with him. We had a little talk. And so I want to show you that right now. Thank you very much. Well, Mr. Mayor, you came to us in 2004. You've been elected 4 times. You've done a great job. Tell us about when you first came to the conference, you know, the mayor of Oklahoma City. How did you feel? How were you treated?
Well, the only really advice I had on being a mayor, I got from a cousin who had been a mayor of Midland, Texas, and my predecessor, who both told me to get more involved with the conference mayors. They both wished they had earlier. And so first thing I did was sign up for that first meeting in June of 2004. And I showed in Boston, and I got there a day early and felt like I was the last one to leave. I mean, I was really enthusiastic about it. And I remember going into this first committee meeting, and in walks Richard Daley. And Mayor Daley starts talking about this issue he has, and it was about tort reform for cities. And then eventually he said, "Well, I need some co-sponsors. Who's with me?" And he looks right at me. And I said, "I'm in." If Mayor Daley needed my help, I was going to be right there for him.
Your experience with the Conference of Mayors, getting to know other mayors, has that helped you?
Well, yeah, it's been the most rewarding thing out there, the relationships I've built and how I've asked questions and seen what other cities have been able to accomplish.
And you don't sometimes know whether the mayor is a Democrat or Republican, right?
That's right. It isn't a partisan atmosphere. And for the most part, city politics doesn't need to be partisan.
I wish we had more of that in the Congress. Last December, you and I met with President Trump in Trump Towers. How'd you feel that day?
It was an experience I'll never forget. We go into the tower, and there's the president-elect. And we sat down, and we're able to engage him in municipal issues. And the President of the United States has a lot of things on their plate. And I think it was a great opportunity for us to communicate the type of issues that we face and how the White House can help us.
Today we're here to talk about how we will create the infrastructure of the future. My budget proposal includes a massive investment in new federal support for infrastructure.
How can you show him what you've done here so that, as we say, if it works local, go national with it?
Well, my predecessors were able to improve the city with a penny on the dollar sales tax. And for the most part, we've been able to keep that penny intact and build some very exciting projects. And every time we build one of those, we want it to be a catalyst. We want it to lead to jobs, or we want it to lead to some sort of economic development.
So what could a governor do to bring it closer together?
Oklahoma's, problem has been that it's been highly partisan at the state legislature. And we have this divide between rural Oklahoma and urban Oklahoma. As long as we continue to divide up and beat each other up, we're not going to be able to compete with other states who have figured out ways to get things done. When we talk about Oklahoma City outside the state, we talk about a place where there's virtually no traffic congestion, where housing prices are extremely low and along with the cost of living, and where we have an abundance of fresh air and clean water. Some places have one or two of those things, but very few have all three.
Mr. Mayor, you're recognized for putting this whole city on a diet, and I think you're the champion in the world, and you've been recognized all over.
I am the most unlikely expert on obesity that you'll ever meet, because for most of my life, the only thing I knew about obesity is that it described me. And then I went to this website sponsored by the federal government, and I typed in my height, I typed in my weight, and I pushed enter, and it came back and said, obese. What a stupid website. And I said, this city is going on a diet, and we're going to lose 1 million pounds.
We had the Murrah building bombing, and it devastated all of us.
The bombing changed my life, and I didn't know about it, the day it happened, but I was, going through some sort of midlife crisis anyway, was evolving from a comedic television sportscaster.
Keith Miller has hit a home run. Keith Miller has done it. Keith Miller, give me 5, yes! Keith Miller has hit a home run, and the 89ers have won! The 89ers have won!
To someone who was more serious by nature and someone who was wanting to take on additional responsibilities in the community. And ultimately, I kind of took that changed attitude and transferred into a news anchor, was assigned to come down and cover City Hall, and that's where I really found that local government was a place where a person could really make a difference.
What has Thunder done to Oklahoma City? What was it like before Thunder, and what's it like after Thunder?
Oklahoma City had a wounded brand. We had been branded by tragedy, branded by the Oklahoma City bombing, by an Oklahoma City tornado. You can't build an economy on tragedies. And I knew from my background that nothing would associate our city's name in a positive manner better than a professional sports team. And so I started going to New York to visit with the NBA and the NHL, but we still weren't getting anywhere until the most extraordinary of circumstances happened in Louisiana, and that's Hurricane Katrina came in and virtually destroyed their sports arena. And because I had established this relationship in New York, I was able to go to the NBA and convince them that for at least 1 year, why don't we let the New Orleans team play in Oklahoma City? People were just amazed at how Oklahoma City supported that team.
We brought our annual meeting here. You took us to the rowing headquarters.
Unless you live here, you really don't understand Oklahoma City's relationship with the river. I grew up, and what we now call the river was really nothing more than a big ditch. There wasn't any water in it. But one of my predecessors saw the wisdom of creating some low-water dams and impounding water. And then our philanthropist came in and made some investments. And before long, we had the finest venue in the world for the sports of canoe, kayak, and rowing. We came back in just a few years ago and built a whitewater facility, so now we host the Olympic trials. And when the Olympic team chooses your facility to train, you're on to something.
Oklahoma, where the wind comes sweeping down the plain.
One of the greatest musicals we've ever heard and grew up with is Oklahoma. Americans can sing those songs. What has that meant to your culture? Do you relate to it in any way?
When I travel all over the country and they hear the word Oklahoma, usually somebody in the crowd will start singing the song.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a recognition of Oklahoma, and it is a great asset and one that we treasure.
Well, Mr. Mayor, we thank you for your leadership in being president of this organization. What do you have to say to the mayors that come behind you?
Throughout my entire life, I've generally gotten out of something what I put into it. But I can tell you from working with Congress in Washington, D.C., a lot of the things that have happened over the last few years would not have happened without the U.S. Conference of Mayors having input. And certainly the relationships between mayors, whether it's a small town or a big town, you're going to learn more about your city by visiting with other mayors somewhere else than you will in any other manner.
Well, thank you very much for your devotion and leadership, and we look forward to whatever you may do in the future.
I've loved every minute of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the 74th President of the United States Conference of Mayors, Mick Cornett of Oklahoma.
Thanks, Tom. What a coincidence, isn't it? Isn't that a coincidence? Well, thank you. That was a pleasant surprise. I appreciate the video and the quick summary of so many things that have happened in my life and in Oklahoma City and in the last year. And Tom, thank you for reminding me some of those things that I had forgotten. And thank you most of all for allowing me to introduce my family, because they're so special. And every mayor knows that when you enter public life, you're dragging that family right in there with you. So I know I don't thank them enough. So thank you all for willing to put up with the ideals and the occasional minor tortures of being in the family of an elected official. And I do want to point out I have 3 daughter-in-laws here, and one of them is celebrating her 30th birthday today. Shayla, would you stand up? Yeah, she's 30 today. Happy birthday. I get a few minutes here to speak, and you know, I have announced I'm not running for re-election back in Oklahoma City, and so the result of that is as you go through the calendar, you realize you're doing things for the last time. And so this is the last summer meeting that I'll be attending. And so it was a time I started reminiscing on the summer meetings in general and my time at the Conference of Mayors, and I jotted down some notes of just how much it seems like it's changed in the 14 years since I attended my first meeting. And I was thinking back to what it was like to walk into that meeting in Boston back in 2004, and the stature of the mayors that I was able to embrace and witness. You know, people like Tom Menino of Boston, and Mayor Riley in Charleston, and Shirley Franklin was still the mayor of Atlanta. Michael Bloomberg was the mayor of New York City, and of course, Richard Daley was the mayor of Chicago. I mean, these are giant political figures. And Mayor Daley, for whatever reason, took a liking to me. And ultimately enjoyed my questions, and they were endless, and a couple of times asked me to travel overseas with him to an extent representing the United States. What was going on was we had this great recession, and most mayors weren't able to travel or didn't choose to travel, and Mayor Daley asked me to go, I go. I don't ask questions. I just say yes, sir, and got on a plane. And I remember one time we came back from overseas. So we land in the United States, and Mayor Daley and I get up out of our seats and we go, and you know, of course, I have no idea that anything is different. This is just a regular flight. There's nothing special about this flight. We just made reservations. We're on this flight. A couple of police officers, though, are there at the door as we exit the plane. I noticed that, and then we walk, you know, down through the stairs. You know how you do, go through the corridors. And before long, though, I wasn't paying attention. I realized we were out like in baggage claim, and I said, don't we have to go through customs? And Mayor Daley says, customs. I mean, how does that happen? And I know you're thinking, well, it was at O'Hare, and Mayor Daley had special privileges. No, we were at JFK. When you're with Mayor Daley, things are different. In those days also, some of the conference meetings turned into chaos, especially around the time of passing the resolutions. I just think there's such a feeling of congeniality in the room today and at this meeting, but it wasn't always that way. And I can remember Don Pasquale was president when you're trying to get through this litany of really tough resolutions that had all these controversies to it. And each one of you knows, especially if you run a council meeting, Robert's Rule of Orders, all of these rules in there. And there's no way any single mayor could ever know exactly every nuance to all of those rules. Well, they were pushing every button they could on Mayor Pasquale. And at one point, he just threw up his hands and said, I got to have help up here. And the parliamentarian earned their money that day. But it was an unruly crowd. And it got worse the next year. The next year, we were basically debating the Iraq War inside the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And it was emotional, and it got ugly. And it didn't break out into a fist fight, but it crossed my mind that it might. Mayors were overly charged. There were obviously mayors there who were against America's entry into the war. There were also mayors there that had children fighting on the front lines. And the chaos got uglier and uglier and louder, and people were discussing withdrawing from the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and it almost felt like we might disintegrate right before our eyes. And in what I believe was the greatest act of leadership I've seen amongst any U.S. Conference of Mayors president, Doug Palmer threw up his hands. He restored order. And he gave us a lecture. I don't remember all of the words, probably 45 to 60 seconds that put us in our place. I do remember how he ended it. He said, we're mayors. We're better than this. He was right. And I haven't seen that type of discord ever since. There was also a lot of inspiration through the years. How many mayors have had the chance to go through the Mayor's Institute of Design? Okay, a lot of hands going up. If you have a chance and you haven't yet, I urge you to do so. They usually try to attract a mayor early in their tenure, try to present a planning problem. But for those who don't know about it, every city has a planning issue that might seem insurmountable, and you're able to take that issue to this institute for kind of a 48-hour closed-door session with some of the top urban planners in the world and other mayors, and they're offering advice that you could never afford to pay out of your rather city budget. And in my case, we were moving an interstate highway that had been going through downtown for decades, and you can imagine the planning issues that emerge when you remove this elevated highway that had been a barrier for all development since it had been constructed decades before. And so with the highway moved, we knew we were opening up this large area of downtown, and the vague idea was to try and construct a green space. And so we took the idea to that design institute of building a large central park in downtown Oklahoma City, ultimately 70 acres in size. But the very first broad discussion I had of that project was at that meeting, and I was able to interact with design professionals like Jeff Speck, who taught me a lot about walkability and pedestrian friendliness and how far we had to go in a lot of those areas in a lot of western cities, including mine. And it's taken me a long time to raise the money to build that park, but we break ground Thursday on a $130 million park that in many ways will reflect what I learned at the Mayor's Institute of Design a long, long time ago. We've also had some, tough emotional times, but there was nothing tougher than in the 2006-2007 era when the President of the United States Conference of Mayors died of cancer. Mike Guido, the mayor of Dearborn, Michigan, was our president. Soon after being installed as our conference president, the cancer grew worse, and And in November of his year as our president, Mike passed away. I was at the National League of Cities meeting in Reno, changed my flight home, flew into Dearborn, as did dozens and dozens of other mayors. And you know, when you're in that scene, you realize just how unique it is, because you know, we're used to gathering in conference rooms like this, and we're used to gathering in committee meetings and talking about really serious subjects, or perhaps we're meeting for a social event in the evening at one of our events. We don't gather at funerals, but we did that day. And I remember as we rose to follow the casket out of the Catholic Church in Dearborn on a crisp, cool day, bright sunshine, I saw a sight that I suppose is my most memorable moment with the U.S. Conference of Mayors. When I looked down the street outside that church and I saw every firefighter and every police officer in Dearborn, Michigan, saluting their mayor for the final time. Another inspirational moment came in one of those, opportunities of sitting on the veranda with another mayor at an event. Just two mayors who just find themselves in the same company and start talking. And I was visiting with Patrick Hayes, who was then the mayor of North Little Rock, Arkansas. And as mayors do, I said, well, what's going on in your city? And he said, well, we got a big initiative coming up on Tuesday. I said, well, tell me about it. I'm always interested in initiatives and how they're constructed and what the chances are of passage. And so I was anxious for him to tell me about it. He said, well, we're trying to build a minor league ballpark and trying to raise taxes to do it. Well, you don't have to tell another mayor. That's not always an easy thing to do. And so I felt for him, and I wanted to, hear out his plan. What are your chances? And he said, well, I think they're pretty good because I put on the same ballot an initiative to enlarge our senior wellness center. We have this senior center, he said, that is so popular. I thought if I put it on the same ballot, it might draw some optimistic seniors, and perhaps they'll allow us to build the stadium too. So we put them on the same ballot, not the same vote, of course, but the same ballot. And he goes, I think we're going to get there. Well, obviously I watched with interest. And they did. They passed it. That senior center was so popular that it helped carry an issue that was important to the mayor, but may not have carried if it had to stand alone on the ballot. And a few years later, I was putting together an initiative, and by then, health and wellness had become one of my top priorities. I realized the aging generation of the baby boomers aging out, and those senior wellness centers had always fascinated me as a concept, as an opportunity to stay healthy, but also to improve the chances of passing other items that might not be as popular as a senior wellness center. So we put everything on the ballot. We put 4 senior wellness centers on the ballot, along with other items. And it passed, the entire items passed 53%. The first of those wellness centers opened up in January, and the way we do it, we build it, we find a private sector operator to run it, crossing our fingers that they can figure out how to make that work, because operations on a senior center and a wellness center, those aren't givens, and they already have 2,500 full-time members. It's running in the black here in the first 6 months. Our second of the 4 will open up this winter. But I can't visit that wellness center without thinking back to sitting on the veranda with Patrick Hayes and understanding his views on how popular that wellness center was and how much his citizens enjoyed it. And now I see that same positive experience taking place in Oklahoma City, and I realize it probably wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been involved in the United States Conference of Mayors. Well, as Tom mentioned, a year ago, we met in Indiana, and I had the opportunity to become the president of this organization. And you know, that picture of me and Lady Gaga and the Dalai Lama is legendary in Oklahoma City now. There are still people that claim I photoshopped that picture. They cannot imagine that the three lives of those people ever crossed in some natural form. But they did. And if you'll think back to what it felt like, and Tom touched on this a little bit, what that felt like, Secretary Clinton came and spoke to us. Former Governor Johnson came in and spoke to us. We didn't have much of a feedback from the Trump campaign, but the campaign kind of felt like it was going to be unfortunate and ugly, but I think all of us had a pretty good idea of how it would ultimately end up. And almost as soon as I became the president of this organization, it just seemed like civil discourse and political anarchy reigned over America. I know of some people who were trying to do some polling, and you know how pollsters are always trying to find a calming opportunity to poll so the electorate will have calm heads when they give you answers. There was no time to poll, in Oklahoma especially. And so July turns to August, and August turns to September, October comes, finally Election Day arrives, and you know, there's a lot of second guessers now, but I think a lot of us thought we knew how that election was going to turn out. And Terry and I spent election night at the Republican Watch Party in Oklahoma City, and all of a sudden the returns don't come in as expected. And you know, we're puzzled, we're stunned, semi-enthused and semi-concerned about what all this means and what could possibly be happening, because I know politics, and this wasn't going the way that I had suspected it would. And so there were so many people coming up to talk to us. I think they just wanted to meet Terry, but nonetheless, my feelings weren't hurt, that we decided we need to leave so we can go home and watch television. I mean, there's some extraordinary series of events seems to be unfolding before our eyes. And so we go home and watch, and of course, as you know, the election turned out much differently than almost everyone in America thought. And when you're the president of the United States Conference of Mayors and there's a change in the presidency, one of your main roles is to try and get a meeting as soon as possible. Well, we had, you know, pretty much done all our prep work. We were ready for, you know, to push the buttons and get that meeting, and all of a sudden we were trying to get a meeting with someone we weren't prepared for. And we were pushing buttons, we were calling in favors. I was calling in favors from people who didn't even owe me a favor, but I thought they might think they owed me a favor. And eventually, somehow, just, you know, out of nowhere, we are told we have a meeting with the president-elect in Trump Tower. And so I call Mitch, call Steve, and call Elizabeth. I say, can you go to Trump Tower in 2 days and not tell anyone where you're going? And they could. And so we walk into Trump Tower, and you know, there's just, you know how you can walk into a building and there's just you just have this feeling in the air. I mean, there's all these tourists running around, and it doesn't feel real. I mean, none of it feels like it's actually happening. So we get in the elevator and we go straight up, and we get off the elevator, and it's just another day. Here's the vice president, and here's everyone you now know of, Mr. Bannon, and everyone famous in the Trump White House, you know, right there in front of us. And so for some reason, I get into the president's office first. The others got delayed or interacted or something. So I'm in the president's office for about 15 seconds by myself. And so I walk in, he sees me, he stands up, he shakes my hand, I sit down, and it's for just a brief few moments, it's just him and me, and he turns to me and he said, "Did you think we were going to win?" And I said, "No." He said, "We surprised him." Yeah. But we had a really good meeting. He said he supported our efforts on municipal bonds, which was a surprise. I don't think anyone had heard that yet. He said he was a fan of cities, which makes sense. He lives them and has partially built them. And I must say, as the months have rolled along here, and I have been the mayor from the red city and the red state, leading an organization that is both red and blue through this minefield of political messiness, that the Trump administration, the Intergovernmental Affairs Office, has opened its arms and is welcoming opportunities for mayors to come see them. And so, to the extent that some of you may not you wonder how welcome you are in this White House, because you may not feel at all as comfortable with the rhetoric and the politics, they would love to talk to you. They would love to bring you in and have conversations about how this administration views America and the policies that can help all of our cities do better. And so I urge you to reach out and be a part of that discussion. Now, the larger question is, where do we go from here? And of course, there are, issues and issues out there. We're right on the cusp of health care and tax reform and immigration, possibly. And, all of these issues are extremely important. I mean, any one of them taken by itself is extremely important. And it could be that distinct policies are right around the corner for everyone in this organization. So this is no time to be lackadaisical or to sit back and allow the course of events to take place without your input. So I urge everyone to get involved. And I'm also inspired as I step down at the end of this weekend as your president about the mayors that I have served with and the mayors that have attended this meeting and that serve in their respective cities. This morning, I was in the homelessness task force meeting. Just wanted to listen. And the new mayor of Sacramento, California, Darrell Steinberg, who I had not met, was talking about his histories with mental illness and dealing with Sacramento's homelessness issue. He had some new ideas and some things he'd been working on. And I realized just, how inspiring it is to hear people continue to work on the hardest issues that we face with new ideas and new inspiration. And I felt better about it. And then I went into the infrastructure task force meeting that Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti is chairing for us. And we all realize that there are opportunities ahead for cities to have a more direct relationship with the federal government on infrastructure funding. And Mayor Garcetti's leading that charge. And in a few minutes, you're going to hear from the mayor of New York City, Bill de Blasio. And these are political giants as well. And we've entered a political world that is more divisive, more bombastic, more unfortunate. But I do want to ask each and every one of the mayors out there to do what you can to not get drawn into the unfortunate negativity that is currently invaded and almost fully vested in our state houses and in the houses of Congress. As Doug Palmer said, we're mayors, and we're better than that. Thank you all. Thanks very much. You bet. Congratulations, sir. You did a great job. It's been a good year. Thank you. One of the best parts about this conference is the friendships you developed, and that allows me to segue into one of my best friends as other mayors, and that is Albuquerque Mayor Richard Berry. Richard is leaving office after 2 terms of leading his city, and we are going to recognize Albuquerque Mayor Richard Berry for his outstanding leader and service to the Conference of Mayors. He's on our advisory board. For the last 3 years, he's led our Metro Economy Standing Committee. Those of you who have watched his work know he's been a strong advocate in Congress and in the White House for preserving the tax-exempt status of municipal bonds. He has worked on the Marketplace Fairness Act. He's worked on enacting legislation to spur economic growth and jobs in local communities. And on his watch, Albuquerque was ranked the 2nd best run city in the nation with a population of over 500,000. That's pretty cool. And also under his leadership, Albuquerque was recently named the 6th most technologically advanced city in America. So please join me in expressing our sincere thanks to Albuquerque Mayor Richard Berry for his outstanding leadership to his city and to the service of the United States Conference of Mayors. Richard. Either Richard walks really slow or he's not here. Well, you know, actually, I remember this happening one other time. And so if Richard is still in Miami, who knows what may have interrupted his schedule, then we will do this all over again at a later time in this convention. I will, just in case that does not happen, though, let me mention that Mayor Berry has been an extremely active advocate for mayors, both with the Yale Leadership Program and in the Community Leaders of America. Interesting story, grew up in Nebraska, became a track star, thought he might have a chance at the 1984 Summer Olympics, went to the University of New Mexico on a track scholarship, didn't make the Olympics, but became mayor of Albuquerque. Never left the city. That's quite a story. All right, moving on, we have the pleasure of hearing from another outstanding mayor. It is Bill de Blasio of New York City. Bill is an esteemed member of the United States Conference of Mayors Board of Trustees, the chair of our Cities of Opportunities Task Force. He was elected in 2013 on a campaign of progressive change, and his administration has made excellent progress on pressing issues that face our nation's largest cities. Over the past 3.5 years, New York has made pre-kindergarten universally available to all New York children, and he's embarked on an ambitious long-term plan to create and preserve affordable housing throughout the city. He's taking crucial steps on law enforcement and criminal justice reform. You know the challenges, you know the man. Put your hands together for the mayor of New York City, Bill de Blasio.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Good morning. Well, I want to tell you something. I hope everyone in this room appreciated the heart and the honesty and the soul of everything that Mick Cornett just said when he was talking about his time as our leader and his time with this organization. And what is all the more striking about Mick's comments, and probably isn't known by most people here in the room, he was out clubbing with Lady Gaga last night. So he basically coming from the clubs, changed, and came right here. Very impressive performance. But Mick, seriously, I have to tell you, you said so many powerful things just now about what's going on in our country, about what we understand as mayors, how we comport ourselves. But I want to thank you. In the midst of the storm, you are a model of what actual good and decent leadership looks like. And this was a time when this country needed to see examples of that and that decency, that openness to people of all different viewpoints. And what we've all done together, and you've helped deepen the bipartisan strength of this organization. What we've done together on infrastructure, what we did together on a highway bill, what we've done together on one of the issues that's a passion for you and me both, mental health, maybe, just maybe, we're showing people what could be in a country that desperately needs to see people actually get to solutions together. So, Mick, you have a lot to be proud of in this presidency and in all you've done. Let's thank our president for a job well done. And I want to thank all my colleagues in the leadership. We look forward to the dynamic leadership of Mayor Landrieu starting in a few days. We thank Mayor Benjamin for his leadership and particularly for sounding the alarm on some of the challenges that we face in Washington. Mayor Couts, thank you for your leadership. We have a strong group of leaders, past and present, of this organization who are united in a search for bipartisan solutions. And I want to thank our host for this extraordinary meeting, Mayor Levine. You've done everything you said you're going to do. I want to particularly thank you for Stephen Marley. That was pretty cool last night. Well done. Let's thank Mayor Levine. Tom Cochran, thank you for keeping this organization strong throughout. And again, we are needed more than ever. Now, look, I want to speak from the heart about what we mean in this moment of history and what's happening literally next week in our country. And I want to remind you, Tom often talks about the very noble history of this organization. An organization founded in a moment of crisis by mayors who, just like Mayor Cornett said, we're better than that, we're mayors. Well, in 1932, there was a recognition that our country was facing unprecedented challenges, and mayors, including my most distinguished predecessor, Fiorello LaGuardia, got together and said, we have to be bigger voices. We have to be more of the solution because it's not happening without us. And we know one thing, everything that happens everywhere else comes right down to our cities. We don't have a safety net. We have to be the problem solvers. We have to be the agents of whatever salvation is there to be achieved. In the 1930s, where there was no roadmap for how to address a crisis that had never been seen before, they were still trying to figure out even the extent of the challenge, mayors said, we will form an organization and it will be a voice and a power in this country. And it will be bipartisan. From the very beginning, there was understanding it had to be bipartisan. And it'll be grounded in the truth of our people and the lives they live, because we're the closest to the ground. We feel it. We feel their challenges. We feel their reality. And the Conference of Mayors, my friends, proceeded to put its stamp on the moment when government arguably was at its very best. 1930s, during the New Deal, when our government stepped in and righted the ship of a failing economy and a nation divided and confused, our mayors helped to create that vision and sustain it. And fast forward now to today, where we face some challenges that we've never seen before. We've literally never seen anything like this. And this is not a partisan statement. This is just a sheer observation on reality. I'm not going to comment on the particular attributes of our president. I don't think we've ever seen a president tweet this much. But beyond that, I will not comment. I will say we've got a particular set of challenges aimed right at us and our people. I want to talk about health care, because as early as Thursday, every one of our cities is about to go through an immense change. As early as Thursday, the lives of our people are going to be altered. And I want to say at the outset something I heard in one of our committee meetings yesterday that really struck me. A couple of my Republican colleagues talking about the health care debate in Washington took pains to make clear that they were not satisfied with the approach to health care that was put together under President Obama. But then they said something very fundamental and something that should unite us all. They said, that being said, what we're watching in Washington is not a solution either. They said that the fact that there's not actually an effort to see how we all could contribute to a solution, how we could do something that rises above partisanship on the topic of health care, we could actually try and figure out what is the long-term fix for our national health care system. There is an opportunity being lost in these days to try and do it right. And I'm saying this to you with urgency. Let me describe the urgency that I feel because of the size of my city. Fully 1.6 million New Yorkers could lose their health insurance if the proposal before the the U.S. Senate were passed. 1.6 million New Yorkers could lose their health insurance. We've all heard the numbers nationally, 23, 24 million could lose their health insurance. Again, in a spirit of bipartisanship, every mayor in this room, regardless of where you are from, the size of your city, or your party affiliation, some of those people are going to be in your city. In many cases, a lot of those people are going to be in your city. Many cities can count those people in the thousands, the tens of thousands. Some can count them in the hundreds of thousands. And when people lose their insurance, families start to suffer. Things start to fall apart in their lives. Their household economy crumbles. It's not just a healthcare and humanitarian crisis, it's an economic crisis. And when people fall apart, when families fall apart, who catches them when they fall? We do. Every single one of us, that's what we do. And we have great partners in charitable organizations, nonprofit organizations, and faith organizations, but they all look to us to be the core of solving these challenges. And so we are staring right now at the possibility that on Thursday we're going to see the wheel turn and this begin to happen to our cities. We're going to see our hospitals stressed in a way they've never seen before. We will see hospitals unable to provide the services they have in the past. We're going to see hospitals close. And sadly, they're going to close in the places where they're needed the most, in some of the regions of the country and some of the cities that have had some of the toughest times. This is what we're watching before our very eyes, but it's not a foregone conclusion. And this is my call to arms, and it's bipartisan because it affects all of us. And because some of the most powerful testimony I've heard about what will happen comes from my Republican colleagues who've talked about their cities, who've talked about what their business communities fear in this legislation, what their hospital leadership fears in this legislation, and that there's got to be a better way. And none of us is surprised when anyone in Washington is a little out of touch with the reality on the ground. We're all too used to that, and that's also tragically bipartisan. We see that disconnect, that sense of being out of touch on both sides of the aisle. Anyone who spends too much time in Washington could fall susceptible to that. But because it's not a foregone conclusion, we have a chance to make a difference. We have a chance to make a difference. There's at least 10 United States senators, all Republican from all different parts of the country, who are making clear that their minds are not made up. And there are people in this room who can have a very big impact on their thinking. And many of our colleagues all around the country whose voices matter to those senators, whose voices matter to their chambers of commerce, their business communities, who are looking at this and saying, wait a minute, this is not a pretty picture for the future of our economies. This is where this issue takes on a lot more meaning, because it's not just about the human consequences, which in and of themselves should be enough. It's also about whether we're going to continue to succeed as cities. Everybody in this room has fought so hard to make your city succeed. Everyone in this room has overcome some of the challenges you were handed. All of us got handed an infrastructure that was aging. All of us got handed a lack of federal investment that's been evolving over decades. We all understood what we were getting into, and we all took it on, right? Everyone in this room took on the mission. And as Mayor Cornett said, everyone found a way to keep scratching together resources and innovation and stretching every dollar. And consequently, our cities are now more than ever in our history the core of the American economy. When this country works, it works in our cities. When jobs grow, they grow in our cities. We are poised to help our nation more than ever before. The innovation, the creativity, the entrepreneurship, the talent, more and more in cities, good for everyone. But not if our healthcare system starts to corrode. It's 1/6 of our economy. It's a job engine unto itself, and if that starts to fall apart, just when we are gaining momentum, we will be held back. So look, the human consequences couldn't be greater. The economic consequences couldn't be greater. Some of the most sober and nonpartisan voices in our communities are desperately worried. Our faith leaders are worried. Our civic leaders are worried because they see something that could unravel so much of our progress. And it's being rushed. And I mentioned our Republican colleagues I talked to yesterday. What they said crystallized for me the fact, why is it being rushed when the consequences are so great and the dangers so profound? And so my message to all of us is pick up the phone and say, stop. Tell your United States Senator, stop. This doesn't have to happen this way. This can be a deliberative process. This can be something that actually attempts to figure out the best of the different models and the different viewpoints and move us forward. It does not have to be a 100% partisan vote 8 years ago, followed by another 100% partisan vote this year. It doesn't have to be that way. That is not a foregone conclusion. Something better could happen. And now I want to say one more thing, because I don't think anyone in this room needs further motivation to tell your senator to recognize what this means in human terms or for our economy. But now let's talk about a hard truth. This is the mother of all unfunded mandates. Because, my friends, when the federal government steps away, when Medicaid dollars are reduced, when insurance is no longer a given, when tens of millions of people don't have insurance, all of those costs come down to us. And that means our local taxpayers. And this is not being talked about. Look, you could be a supply sider on economics, or you could be someone who believes in a strong government investment model. Doesn't matter. Either way you slice it, we can see factually there are big tax cuts for the wealthy in the Senate bill. And that just means practically that those costs that are no longer covered by federal dollars, they've got to go somewhere. Have you noticed over the years that the federal government, and too often our state governments as well, when something becomes inconvenient, they just look the other way, and suddenly it's on us. And isn't that amazing how equal an opportunity it is? It's on us whether we're Democrat or Republican, big city or small city. Every region of the country, it ends up being on us. And that means it's on our local taxpayers, who are already stressed enough by the taxes they're paying. But you know what we're going to do? We're not going to stand idly by. We're not going to watch people suffer. We're not going to see families fall apart. We don't think that way. None of us as mayors think that way. We're going to try and find a solution, but in the end, it will fall on our taxpayers. Now, I just ask you, with urgency and with passion, tell your senator exactly that this is not what we signed up for. Tell them there's got to be a better solution, and maybe that solution takes some deliberation. Maybe that solution takes some bipartisanship and some thoughtfulness and some honest effort at give and take. But one thing I can say, and I'll conclude on this, Thursday is 0 hour for all of us. You know, I was listening to Mayor Cornett talk about his meeting with President Trump and some of the experience he's had since, and I thought about how a lot of what's happened so far still really hasn't fundamentally changed our lives yet and our cities yet. That all changes on Thursday. Whatever you think of the president, whatever party you're in, if you have not yet experienced the change, you're going to feel it as early as Thursday. And I don't think it's going to feel good. But I will tell you, with every passing day, more senators are offering their own concerns openly. There's actually some beginning of a reconsideration going on, and that can be deeply moved by the voices in this room. And all the people you represent, the power of your voice, your ability to reach all the other leadership of your city and your metro area and get them focused on saying, stop. Find a real solution. Find a real solution. Find a decent solution, a humane solution. Find a solution that doesn't undercut our economic growth. Because you know everyone will still be looking to us to create the jobs, to fuel the economy, to provide the revenue that they like to spend. So this is a moment, just like when this organization was founded in the midst of the Great Depression, mayors had the audacity to say, we will not be defeated by this nemesis. Greatest economic crisis in the history of the country, and mayors in this country said, we will not be defeated. We will change the course of history. My friends, in the next few days, I ask you to do it again. It's up to us to change the course of history and protect the cities we love and the people we love as well. Thank you. God bless you all.
Very well put. All right, thank you, Mayor de Blasio. Okay, so it's 11:14, and according to my schedule, committee meetings start at 11:15, so you have plenty of time. The committee meetings coming up, let's see, Children, Health and Human Services, Jobs, Education and the Workforce, the Environment Committee, Transportation and Communications, and then be back here by 12:30 for our City Livability Awards luncheon. We will be joined near the end of that lunch by former President Bill Clinton. We'll see you then. We're adjourned.
Tú eres el imán y yo soy el metal. Me voy acercando y voy armando el plan. Solo con pensarlo se acelera el pulso.